Welcome back, everybody, to me complaining about the Wheel of Time. Yes, we're back with the debrief kind of thing, and today it's time to tackle a very difficult subject, and that is the sexism of Wheel of Time. And oh boy, there's a lot. So, I guess we'd better get into it, and I'm gonna cheer one of my Patreon backers today. One of the first ones that actually trusted me, and still is with me because probably she forgot to cancel. Anyway, Livia, this is very much for you. Cheers. Now, if you want to do the same, or even want to force me to drink a beer of your choice, you can totally go to the Patreon. I would very much appreciate it, but there's no obligations whatsoever. You don't have to do that. You don't even get bonus videos. You get everything here. All right, let's address the sexism. And let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, and that is, I'm a dude. And not only that, I'm a very dudeish dude. I have a beard. I'm drinking beer here, right? I should not be the person addressing this, and I'm aware of it. And I'm also not happy with the fact that I'm the one doing it right now. I thought about what to do with it, and ideally I'd have a female content creator here telling me all about her feelings about this and talking about their perspective, their views on the matter. That would be perfect. Unfortunately, I did not find anyone. I don't know anyone who would be willing to do that. Now, if you, after watching this, feel like you want to do that with me, I'd be more than happy to actually, host a call or whatever, and we'll, record a video on a actual female perspective on this. And it's bitterly needed, trust me. The other side is, if you have views on this whole subject and you want to, drop them in the comments, that would be also awesome. And if you're not comfortable, putting your views on it on, public down there in the comments section, I understand that. In that case, send me an email and I'll do a follow-up video with all of your perspectives, and I'll make it, anonymous, so everyone, no one knows who's written what. That's what I certainly can do and what I certainly will do. I'll also try to link some of the very few articles I found written by women on the subject in the description box, because, that would be really cool. Because, and that's the point, I looked for sources, and even there, it's very hard. I found some written by men, I found some very few written by women, and, most of the discussion seems to be on, Reddit or all kinds of forums, and I frankly don't have the time to deal with Reddit in this day and age. So those are not here. There's some videos out there that are by dudes, and they're explaining how the Wheel of Time is either not sexist or just portraying reality, and that they're hoping that the Amazon show will not buckle before the woke mob. And yeah, that's a red flag right there. It should tell you something about the source material if dudes feel the need to explain how they better don't change anything. Because if you do that, deep in your heart, you might already fear that there's something wrong with these books. And I'm gonna look at it today in some detail. All right. So what I'll try to do is to take because it's me, a, more male perspective on why it is harmful for dudes to read something like this in the way it is portrayed, in the way it is written. That's sort of what I want to do. And I also don't want to just focus on the very obvious one, which is, all the bosoms and swaying hips and the astonishing lack of bulging crotches, which would, equal things out a bit. That kind of stuff. I'm not going to focus on those things. They are there. It's fairly easy to, find them. It has been spoken about before. I want to try to make a more systematic argument on why the fundamental sexism baked into the setting is the problem here. And not just, the overt male gaziness of a lot of things, that kind of stuff. Yeah. You don't need me to tell you all about that. It'll show up on the sides, but I'm trying to make, as I said, a more Systematic argument. The argument will broadly follow the following way. One, a short look at the fundamentals, a very specific aspect of real world sexism. Then we're going to move onwards from there into Wheel of Time's world building. And then we're going to move on from there into where the two intersect and what are the really hard, problematic consequences of that. And at the end of that, we're going to look at why this is a real problem for readers and should be addressed in a lot of ways, more often than it is so far. All right, let's look at the real world sexism thing that I want to look at here, and that is what I would call a very 1950s style of casual sexism or old man's sexism. The one coworker, the one uncle, whoever, who always tells jokes about women. You probably have one in your family that's slightly embarrassing, hopefully really embarrassing, makes you very angry, and you try to avoid him at family parties until he's, passed out because of all the drinking. That guy. I'm not saying Robert Jordan is that guy or was that guy, because I have never met the guy and I assume he has really good intention. But it's that sort of sexism that I want to look at. The kind of guys who tell jokes like, if a man does something and there's no woman to tell him that he did something wrong, did he actually still do something wrong? That kind of guy. That kind of jokes. That kind of idea that lies behind it. And the idea behind that, of course, is very simple. It's there is two genders. People that believe that kind of thing usually don't even say gender, they say sex. Language change and so forth, And they are fundamentally opposite. There is a general lack of communication between the two, and it is impossible for the two to ever understand each other. It's an idea that has pervaded patriarchal societies, and especially the West, all the way until the 90s, with books Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, that kind of stuff. It's obviously wrong, and I guess most of us who have ever met more than two people in our lives should know that it is wrong, but it has stuck in a lot of ways, and it's all kinds of toxic. It's all the way back ideas that men are kind of childish and a bit and stubborn and these kind of things, and women are irrational, hysterical. The word hysteria comes from actually a Greek term for the, I'm lacking words here, uterus, I think. Something like that. Point is, it is female-coded. Insanity oftentimes was female-coded, and irrationality was female coded, and that's a problem already. So this is all the way back with some darker sides, and has always had this casual side to things, right? We've seen that stuff, and it's not good in general, and it's unfortunately still around. Now, as I said, there's darker sides to it, and there's the just annoying bits, the jokes about how women have way too many shoes, and those kind of things. They're in there. The darker sides, are other stereotypes that we need to talk about, although I will make a different video on just the really toxic stereotypes that are unfortunately also in these books. So I'll try to avoid the red Aja problem today. Just saying. So we have all of these ideas. There have been around forever and ever, and they're wrong. Now we go and look at the fundamental world building of the Wheel of Time, and we'll see where that is going. Now, the Wheel of Time claims to be a world where women have a lot of power. The Wheel of Time also has a magic system, right, that is fundamentally binary. There is two halves of the male of the one source. They're called Sidene and Sidar, and one of them is female coded. That's Sidar. That's only women have access to that, and one is male, and that's only Sidene. I call them dick magic and boob magic. Although, bosom magic, I guess. So yeah, dick magic and boob magic. That's what we have in this world, and men can't learn boob magic, and women can't learn dick magic. fundamentally baked into the system is that gender binarity, is that a word? Yeah, and the impossibility of communication between the two, basically, because women can't teach men to learn stuff, and men can't teach women how to channel. It just doesn't work, because, yeah. Now, that is a choice. It's maybe not a very elegant choice, and certainly a choice that you probably wouldn't make in the year 2022. But, Robert Jordan started writing this thing in like 1984, so we can sort of forgive him the idea of dealing with that. At least he thought about like making gender a lens for his books. And he put in, and this, I have to admit that in all fairness, he put in a ton of female characters. Like the gender ratio within his book, if you accept the fact that there's only, female and male and like very straight up genders in there, is pretty damn good compared to, I don't know, Lord of the Rings, of course, but like also most other fantasy series at the time and shortly after. You go for Austen Art by Tad Williams or whatever. The ratio is really good in Wheel of Time, which on the surface, enforces that idea that Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time is actually fairly good when it comes to like sexism, right? We have a lot of female characters, even like almost first level characters, like almost main characters. We have a lot of them. They're viewpoint characters. They go around. They do things. They're even in the world, right? We have the Aes Sedai, the group of women that can use magic, because men can't use magic in this world at the time when we're reading the books. We have them. We have the queens in Ebudar, in Caemlyn, in the Borderlands. There's a lot of women who are supposedly in power. Now, I guess you've already noticed the word supposedly, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now we, however, need to look at another aspect of this world and this world building, and that is that even men and women who can't channel have a serious communication problem in this world. And we know that because we have a lot of female and male characters who have no ability to use magic. And a lot of them constantly think about men or women, depending on which gender they are, right? And the way they think about each other is very much, men think that women are impossible to understand, completely impossible to understand, because they change their opinions all the time. They have violent mood swings, and no matter what a man does, a woman will certainly yell at him for doing it wrong. That's how most of the men in this world think. And on the other hand, you have women, and they think, you know what, men are kind of stupid and very stubborn, and you need to keep information away from them. You need to keep them and lead them by the hand, because otherwise, because they're kind of children, they will just, do something stupid, and women have to be in charge because they're smarter than men. All right. Now that's bad. But is it really bad? That's what I want to look at here. And the point is, you could use this as an examination of bad stereotypes, right? And prejudices, because I'm pretty sure you know some people in your world who sort of believe the same kind of thing, right? That women are kind of crazy and men are kind of childish. There's, the entire businesses of romantic comedies have been, built on that thing. It's pervasive as fuck. So yeah, you could examine those kind of prejudices and look at that. Does Robert Jordan do that, however? That's the question that I want to look at here. And that's where I think The Wheel of Time falls short and is actually really badly sexist in a dangerous way. Because what Wheel of Time does is usually it claims things. Robert Jordan, and at the end, obviously, Brandon Sanderson, but for better or worse, it's mostly Robert Jordan, because he set up the world and everything, right? Robert Jordan, as a writer, claims a lot of things about his world. It's in general a thing. His writing style is a very declarative kind of thing in the whole, show don't tell, tell don't show kind of thing. He's certainly someone who tells a lot and uses that. He makes a lot of statements how things are, how things will be, and so forth. He does that a lot. And There's nothing wrong with that. It's one way of writing things, right? Robert Jordan wrote a lot of Conan pastiches before he started writing Wheel of Time, and that declarative style of writing is very much a sword and sorcery style from the 1930s. And once again, there's nothing wrong with it. And despite all the sexism and racism, I do really enjoy me some Conan the Barbarian from time to time. Don't get me wrong. So that's one thing. And in his statements, a lot of the time, Robert Jordan claims, or the Wheel of Time declares itself to have a lot of strong female characters. We have the Aes Sedai manipulating everything. We'll come back to the manipulating in a second. We have Queen Morghese running Camelin, the strongest, and Andor, the strongest land in the world, which you already learned is basically the best land because everyone there is, white and freedom-loving and upstanding and all of these wonderful things. We have a lot of other, so to say, strong female characters. That's what it says on the paper. Now, let's look at what happens to a lot of these strong female characters. Or female characters supposedly in power. Now, Queen Morghese for a long time leans on Gareth Bryn, her lover, and Captain General. And then, for some reason, she kicks him away and is under the sway of Ravine, Lord Gabriel. Both of those are suspiciously male. Which raises the question, how much does she actually decide and how much is, someone else's choice and whatnot? Can she actually run the country on her own, or does she need a man at her side? Which we'll come back to that at the end. We look at the Aes Sedai. A lot of times the Aes Sedai seem to be fairly ineffectual when it comes to actually doing things during the world. It is always claimed that they rule everything and they have strings around everyone, right? We hear that a lot. But what we see is usually the Aes Sedai failing at manipulating, failing at doing these things. It doesn't bear out, this idea. Even back home in the Two Rivers, right? You have the strong women's circle, and all the men are afraid of the women's circle. But who actually calls the shot in Emmons Field? It's the mayor, of course, and he's a guy. Just saying. There's all of these things. We have our main characters, right? We have Mat, Perrin, and Rand, who get plot armor because they're Taviran. We have our three girls, Egwene, Elaine, and Nynaeve. They don't get plot armor. They don't get to be Taviran. There's that. So who's actually in charge in that series of 6 main characters? Certainly not the women. I mean, Egwene does a lot of stuff on her own. Elaine and Nynaeve do a lot of stuff on their own. But at the end of the day, it's usually the men who end up helping them. And this is where we'll come and go to next. So remember about how I said at the beginning that with that classic sexism of women thinking that they know stuff, women complaining about men all the time, women trying to do all the things on their own, that cliche, well, a lot of characters in here do the same. I mean, you can say they're strong women, they're capable, strong women, they're going to do things, right? Turns out, whenever they do that, they usually fall on their face and need to be rescued by men whom they told explicitly to not do that before, and they still do it because they're good boys, and then they save the women. That happens a lot in these books, whether it is at the ending of The Dragon Reborn, where for no reason whatsoever, the women end up to be, as hostages in the tower, in the Stone of Tyr, and we're not even talking about why that makes no sense, and Mat has to go and rescue them, and then they tell him off for it. When they go to, where is it? To Abu Dar, and Mat is, sent along, and they try to string him along to use or abuse him for all kinds of things. At the end of the day, it is still Mat who'll save their ass. Of course it is. We have a lot of these instances throughout the entire book where women make decisions which are usually irrational decisions and stupid decisions, and then men have to rush in and help them out. Now, does that look like a world with a lot of strong women? I don't know. Let's come back to the magic for a moment here, because this is where we'll try to tie it all together. The magic, obviously, as I said, there's boob magic and there's dick magic. And while that is already stupid, we need to talk about like, how it works. And that is, when a man uses dick magic, he has to seize Sidane and has to conquer it and has to force it, his will upon it, to bend it to his will, to use it like a tool or a hammer or a sword. He has to, he has to force his will on it. The fact that the word thrust is not used in that regard is, I guess, due to the fact that Robert Jordan is very careful to avoid really sexual language, but that's just it. On the other hand, we have boob magic, when a woman wants to use Sidar. When she wants to get some cider, what she does is she has to open herself to it like a blossom. She has to submit to the force of it. She has to embrace it, be yielding to it, and then guide it tenderly. Yes. Now, did I kind of exaggerate here? No, I didn't. At the beginning of The Shadow Rising, Book 4, we have a really terrible scene where Rand and Elaine and Egwene are in one room, and Elaine and Egwene are trying to teach Rand, or like, at least pretending to try to teach Rand how to use the power. That kind of ends up in a really weird and awkward like spanking situation, because so many things do in these books, but that's where we have that conversation on like how men need to be forceful and put their, forceful and enforce their will on the power, and women are yielding and accepting and submissive, and how that's the only way how that works. Ugh. I don't know. This is kind of weird. And I think this is, I wanted to bring that up because we're going to like a really traditional thing here at the end of the day. Because Robert Jordan states a lot of times that the greatest works of magic were always performed when there were men and women working together. And that's a noble sentiment, and you can look at it and see, like, on the surface, he claims that communication, compromise between men and women is the key to success, and we need to be accepting of the other gender, right? Gods, it's so terrible. Anyway, of the other gender, work together, and then we can actually achieve great things. Now, as I say, let's set aside for a moment that this is like a completely binary world, but, this is written in the 80s. And unless you were non-binary or transgender in the 1980s, chances were pretty high that you never thought about that kind of issue, I guess. Because we were ignorant and also taking cocaine all the time. Well, not me, I was like not old enough for cocaine in the 80s. Much to my regret. Point is that is on the surface, but there is no equality between gender, between men and women in these books. It's always men are stronger, they need to enforce their will, women have to be more accepting and yielding. Now, have you heard of the word helpmeet? I hope you haven't. Or if you have, it's from like a very Christian background. It's like that the wife has to be the helpmeet of the man, of the husband. It's how that works. And at the end of the day, when it works best, it is a man being in charge of a circle of women, which makes it even weirder. Well, we're not going there. Of a circle of women, because women can link power and men can guide larger circles, and it's always the man who has to guide at that time. And that's a fairly conservative kind of view of the world, to put it mildly. So men should be in charge, women should listen to them, because that's how it works at the end of the day. And when both do that, and, men accept the eccentricities of women, and women are aware of the fact that men sometimes need some careful guiding because they're more enthusiastic than they are smart, they're a bit childish, and then, all will be well. And it's pretty fucking horrific. Now let's look at some of the dangerous consequences and how these, bear out in this world. Because one of the big themes of the Wheel of Time is that world is kind of fucked because men and women are not working together. It's mostly human intrigue that is plaguing the world and makes the dark ones, and we'll talk about the dark ones at another time, right? Makes the dark ones and evil ones work so much easier. The Forsaken barely have to do anything. It's usually people not understanding each other and intriguing against each other that are the huge problem here. And let's look at how that works. Well, turns out the master manipulators of the world are the Aes Sedai, which are all women. And they do that all the time. Even the women that are not Aes Sedai, that can't even use magic, they go and manipulate men, because that's the only way they know how to get, men to do what they want. And they so believe that they should be the people who do that. There's a scene in, I think it's book 5, I might be wrong, where Nynaeve and Elaine are at a town somewhere, I guess in Gildan at the time. It doesn't really matter. And they want to leave, and they're still with the circus, with Wallin Lucas' circus. So Nynaeve, and they already have someone like Uno, a guy, telling them that he'll get them out. So Nynaeve takes it on herself to do it anyway, and she goes into town. She talks with both the Prophet, who is obviously mad, and with Gallard, who kind of has a crush on her, I guess. And she uses both of them and makes both promise to give her a ship so she can leave for different reasons, but it sort of because she thinks she has to do that on her own because she's a strong, independent woman. Well, what ensues is basically civil war and a mass massacre, basically, because a ship turns out and up on both sides try to seize it to give it to Nynaeve. And then Uno and Gallard and lots of men have to escort them to the ship so they can leave anyway. And that's emblematic for it. It's like when women try to take charge and do things their way, it ends in disaster. It's men who have to pull them out of the fire, basically. And they always do it by manipulation. Now that doesn't sound too good. And I'm not even going to mention into which really dark corners of the internet you have to go to hear that women are basically master manipulators all the time and men need to be, let's not go there. We'll have to go there in a second anyway, but, I just wanted to point out that we're going that way, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think I've tried to give you some points here. There's more of the casual sexism stuff that I mentioned from, the early, how women behave. So, all of the women are apparently always obsessed with clothing and so forth. So, it is kind of annoying to go that direction, but I wanted to make sure that it's kind of all connected in a way. And there's an even darker one behind it. I think I can point to that to tie it all up. Remember how the world was broken by Lews Therin, Telemann, and the 100 Companions when they tried to save the world by sealing the bore where the Dark One was in? And remember why it failed? It failed because the female Aes Sedai, the women, decided to not trust Lews Therin and not go with him and not help. Now, I don't know if you guys have read a book called Genesis and have heard about that situation where man lost paradise and have heard about, who supposedly is to blame for that kind of crap, right? And we're coming back to that main idea that at the heart of it lies a very much Christian fundamentalist old school form of sexism that drives the entire world building, but also the entire underlying structure and the way things actually shake out, unlike what is written on top of it as claims like strong women and so forth. Because at the end of the day, the women need to do what Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, tells them to do. They can help, they can support him in all kinds of ways, and it is still him who has to go and fight the Dark One with their help. And it works because this time round, the women listen to Rand, finally, at the end of the day. All right. That's sort of the main argument that we have here. Now let's look at why this is a problem. Well, The Wheel of Time is written for, is mostly read, or was mostly read by a young audience, fairly young audience. The language is fairly, tame. It's no Joe Abercrombie. It's no Richard K. Morgan. It doesn't, go really deep into the swearing or the explicit sex or the really gory violence and stuff like that. It's fairly child friendly. It is mostly read at the time. We're talking about the 90s mostly. I mean, readership has shifted, but it's predominantly read by male readers, by young male readers. And by making gender and gender interaction and romance and relationships such a core theme of the stories, and well, I guess for a lot of, boys in their 13s to 15s, 16s, whatever, when they're reading that kind of stuff, relationships are fairly on top of your, hormone-sodden mind at the time. And you have a fantasy book which has all the sword fights, which is really interesting. And it also actually talks about girls. They may even show some bosom. and that's your, viewpoint that you get of the world, which is, as I just pointed out, about girls being vain, not to be trusted, kind of crazy. So don't worry if you don't understand them. It's impossible to understand them. They're kind of crazy and manipulative. So don't let them manipulate you. Go your own way. Do your own thing. Because at the end of the day, you will have to go and rescue them anyway. And you'll go into a bright future once they start listening to you. Does that sound like a healthy thing to read? I don't know. I think this is where a lot of the danger lies with the underlying sexism. Now, is there more when it comes to the humiliation of women and stuff like that? Hell yeah, there is. All the really strong women get humiliated or murdered at some point. Which, but I'll probably keep all of that stuff somewhere else, because we've already spoken about this far too long. Anyway, this is why I think the underlying sexism of the Wheel of Time is a huge problem and needs to be addressed. I mean, if you read it and you had a lot of fun with it, I'm not taking this away from you, but maybe examine what you liked about it and why you liked it, and maybe try to look at how much you took away from that as a reader. Because we can all try to be better, and deep in our hearts, I believe most of us kind of know gender relationships don't work like that. Relationships in general don't work like that. And, I guess we'd all be happier if we actually accepted that. So yeah, I hope you took something away from this. Let me know what you think about it. I'd really appreciate your opinions, and I'd love to talk to you all about the sexism within the Wheel of Time. Anyway, have a great day. Cheers.